Howdy, folks. Happy Tuesday. Sorry for yesterday, but I was up in Toronto covering the Leafs Islanders game, and it was sort of tough for me logistically to be able to run the show. But we're back today. Kevin will be joining us in a minute. We'll start with the pre-show. Go ahead, Perla.
So let's talk about some shopping. Black Friday's coming up.
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to let people know we all should love Amazon for their shipping. But the thing about Amazon is they've raised their prices a lot more than you realize.
Shocking.
And so I would just even say to you, make sure you're competitively shopping and not just buying on Amazon because it's easy. You could save some good money.
Right.
I fell into that trap a little bit, and then I started looking at it and say, "Whoa, look what they raised this to. Look what they raised," and everybody did, during the inflationary time. But it's more than you would expect because there was a time they were pretty much lower than everybody on almost everything. It is no longer the case.
Yeah, I mean, there's one particular item I've been looking for. I believe I'm not a good guitar player, but I enjoy. And I'm more of a bass player than a 6-string player, and I want to get a Rickenbacker bass,
right?
And I've been looking on Reverb and a couple other sites to see, like I not that I don't want to pay. I mean, it's pay a competitive price, but when I would say before the supply chain situation, when it was an inflation, when it was they were going for $2,200, and now they're going for $2,700. I'm gonna wait until the prices go down a little bit, and if they don't, then I just don't get it. But it's going to be patently absurd.
Well, I don't know. I'm on Guitar Center's site. Let's see.
And Christopher Patton in the chat here says that they're overpriced. I mean, yes, they are, but the reason they're overpriced is because a lot of people want them. So I mean, I get it, but I mean, hey, Kev, how's it going?
Good. What's going on? I see we're live. Okay.
We are live. Yes,
we are live.
Russ was just talking about Amazon, sort of.
Yeah, I was saying, going into Black Friday, don't just assume Amazon's the cheapest on everything because they're not. They, they went through a pretty good price raise not that long ago, and I found now that they're the cheapest on maybe 30% of the stuff you get. But that's but it used to be everything. For a while, it was like everything.
Yeah, for sure.
That's all.
I have to say that the Academy Awards are usually held, I think, in late March or in April, and in Los Angeles. But I think they've moved. They've moved to Qatar in November because I have never seen. I was watching some of the World Cup games yesterday. Didn't get a chance to watch U.S. versus Wales, which I was, disappointed at the score. But I watched about 25 minutes of Poland versus Mexico. And Kev, I know the reputation of hockey players being divers like Nazem Kadri or Brad Marchand or whatever. I have never seen more diving in 25 minutes in one soccer game. It's like they've been shot, and then all of a sudden they're running around like nothing is wrong.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the soccer tradition. And, when you're a hockey guy and a soccer guy like I was, it got to be mind-boggling, and then I just realized that that's part of their tradition.
Yeah.
So, as my wife always said, you bring it out, you sprinkle a little holy water on them, then you carry them off the field, and then they're healed, and then they run back on. So
they laid the holy water on them.
Yeah.
If you remember baseball in the 70s, they used to spray the ethyl chloride on them.
It's funny, but I've had conversations with European, and they're just not the least bit bothered by it because that's just their tradition, And I said, well, what I said to them, I said, yeah, but when you're a sports writer like me, I can usually tell how a hockey player goes down or he doesn't get up, how severe the injury is. You got no idea with a soccer player.
Yes,
that's true.
Yeah, because when they're really hurt, they act the same as if when they're not hurt. So, but it's not like the here, we look at that as kind of negatively, what are you doing? But that's not how it's viewed elsewhere in the world. That's just part of the culture. So.
And Corinne in the chat's like, Mike doesn't like football. I actually like football. I like soccer. I love it. I'm watching the World Cup. I just despise this. Okay. I mean, there were plays today in this game where it was an extra time, and obviously they're trying to get a penalty kick or a free kick or something like that, and it's just like, oh my god, it's like all of a sudden they just completely. It's a dive that would embarrass Nazem Kadri. I mean, really, just because Kadri is.
Yeah, again, you're just applying your
Yes.
ideas to the game. I mean,
that's true.
So that's just not how they view it. But I did watch the Wales U.S. game, and it was really remarkable. And we see this in football a lot too. But it was a complete two different games. The U.S. were in complete control in the first half, and Wales was in complete control in the second half. I mean, it was like the teams. They just brought two new teams in or something. It just wasn't even remotely, the same game. And now Americans have put themselves behind, the hurt bucket, because I'm assuming that Wales and England will be highly competitive just because, the Welsh and the
English
and the English don't always get along. So, I would assume that'll be a tight game. So the goal differential will matter, but
it's going to come down to who has the better goal differential against Iran between Wales and.
I think it's going to come down to who has the better goal differential against England.
Maybe,
because I think they'll both punish. I mean,
yeah.
We'll give it a second here.
How close will the games with England be for each team? And I don't know, but it was. I do get caught up. I really enjoy the nationalism of World Cup and how everyone's into it. And I saw interviews done even here in Detroit with bars and restaurants to say, our restaurants are going to be filled.
Yeah.
Filled with patrons, and for every game. There's people from every country, and so.
Well, I know Canada hasn't been in the World Cup in 36 years, and they play tomorrow. I think it was against Belgium. So when I was up in Toronto yesterday, they were extremely excited for that game. And they're I think on par with the U.S. So I mean, I don't know what kind of chances they have of advancing. All I know is, like somebody in the chat just mentioned, Saudi Arabia beats Argentina, and that's
incredible. Like, in my house. My wife, who coached high school soccer for 20 years, and my son played. Like, soccer is such a big sport. Like, that was such a huge thing for my wife. Like, she, I wasn't in the room, I was working, and she came in and said, "You're never going to believe this, but Saudi Arabia beat Argentina." Like, she, like what she had just seen, a miracle. As she said, some people are already calling this the biggest upset in soccer history. So
it might be.
Yeah.
Just one note before we start, Kev, I was really impressed with in the span of 48 to 72 hours, they sold 52,000 seats in Detroit. Now, some of them were people who traveled outside of Cleveland and outside of Buffalo, or in Buffalo and in Cleveland to travel there, and it was tough with the weather. But 52,000, even though it was reduced price, in 72 hours to fill that stadium for that Bills-Browns game. I was really impressed.
Yeah, no, that's right. I've heard that, they got a lot of bodies down there. And it's going to be a meaningful game. I think the Bills now have more wins, if they beat Detroit, they'll have more wins in that stadium than the Lions do this season. So.
But the Lions have won 3 games in a row, so it's not
3 in a row. Yeah.
It's not going to be a cakewalk. Are you going to that game or?
No, I'm not. I actually sold my tickets
Okay.
just because I'm going up north for Thanksgiving. But it's interesting, Russ. Or did we talk about this the other day? I was on a podcast, and one of the people there wanted to know my thoughts and my co-host's thoughts on the quarterback of the Jets not taking responsibility.
Yeah, Zach Wilson. Yeah.
Yeah. And whether and they wanted it to relate it to hockey. I mean, there's the false assumption, I think, that all hockey players take responsibility for their poor performance. I don't think that's true.
No, it's not true.
As a guy that's covered the league for a long time, so
no, that's not true. The only thing I'll say about it is, if it were up to me, I would make the change because, there were 2 winnable games, especially that one. Like that one, you had the ball last. New England already had blown 2 field goals. You weren't going to get an easier chance to win a game. All you needed was a field goal, and they failed on that. So that would be enough to make me put in at least Mike White to see. The weird thing is, though, Flacco had a couple of good games and a couple of bad games, and it does make you wonder if they might default back to Flacco again because the line is better now. So I can't even say that he's out of the question on this. I can't.
They simply don't trust him, Russ. It's like, if you're going to go conservative, do what Chicago's doing and run him a lot. He's a very mobile quarterback.
But the thing is, they have figured out he's mobile because his escapability is good. Belichick jammed the outside, but the guys didn't rush until they saw him running. They only went like half speed. So then when they did, they closed in on him. And if he tried to go up the middle, they had coverage up the middle. So that was kind of hurting the way he was taught to escape. And so that game, he didn't have an answer for that. So I think that's causing problems. I do want to also put out this Thanksgiving tip that I do every year. I always eat during the Lions game because I don't expect anything out of the Lions. So I feel like I'm not missing anything at that point.
Well,
my aunt, when I was growing up, who always hosted Thanksgiving, and we always had a lot of people, she would time her dinner to be at halftime of the
That's what we're trying to
game.
do. Yeah.
And like she would come in and she'd say to my cousin Bud, she'd say, "Bud, you got to let me know when there's 2 minutes to go." If she was trying to get that gravy right, she was, all it had to be, just right. And that was the thing. We'd holler downstairs, 2 minutes to go before
That's
the half.
hilarious. That's even harder. I tried to do it that way, and then I just gave up. Like, hey, you can mute the Lions. I could just watch what's going on.
Yeah, well, in Detroit, you can't mute the Lions.
And this year it's impossible. It's going to cause havoc in Buffalo because it's a 12:30 start. And I'm the chief chef when it comes to the turkey. The turkey is going to have to be in the oven before the Lions game because the turkey takes 4.5 hours, and I'm going to be basting with one hand and looking at the TV screen with the other as the Bills and the Lions are playing. So anyway, let's start the show. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Tuesday, November 22nd, 2022.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology, and Adam Ruzicka has not come out of nowhere.
Kevin Allen, I've double dipped on Thanksgiving like some NHL players, although I didn't do one Canadian Thanksgiving and one U.S. I'm going to do 2 U.S.'s. I had one on Saturday, and I'm doing another one on the actual day.
I like it.
Yeah. Yep. And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com, and that was an homage to Eck because I didn't know what the date was, but Ross was like, "Ooh, Mike is screwing up."
Yeah, I don't believe you, but okay.
All right, let's start. Let's start with the game that I was at last night and the repercussions of such. The Toronto Maple Leafs lost to the New York Islanders 3-2 in overtime. The Leafs seem to have a mental block when it comes to overtime. They played 20 games and they've lost 5 in overtime. They've won 1 and lost 5. That's an anomaly that may change, during the season, but that was overshadowed, Kev, by the injury to defenseman Morgan Rielly early in the third period. It was one of those collisions that was sort of inadvertent and odd. Him and Kyle Palmieri went knee to knee. They both went down on the ice. They both went to the benches. Rielly tried to come out for another shift. Couldn't do it. Went to the locker room, never came back. Last night after the game, Sheldon Keefe indicated they were going to do an MRI to find out what was going on. And even before the results of the MRI came out this morning, he was placed on long-term injury, and they called up a couple of defensemen from the Toronto Marlies. Subsequently, reports from Darren Drager and I think Elliot Friedman mentioned as well, it's a grade 1 or grade 2 MCL injury, and he's out for 4 to possibly 6 weeks. So right now, the Maple Leafs are without Jake Muzzin probably for the year, without TJ Brody, who's been their best two-way defenseman for at least another couple weeks. Maybe, you know, that he was supposed to be back at the end of this month, and they said the progress was slow. And now are without their minutes-eating number one defenseman in Morgan Riley. Whenever a team has this kind of injuries, they sort of hunker down. But, you know, they have really, I mean, now you're talking about a bunch of 4s, 5s, and 6s playing in the role of numbers 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah. Well, and those are harsh injuries for a team that obviously is not among the best defensive units in the league. So it feels like they're going to have to do something. You know, to figure this out. I don't think you go big. I don't think if you're going to go big, you don't go big until closer to the trade deadline. But, you know, they're going to have to plug the hole. There's no doubt about it, because you don't want, you know, this Atlantic, we do have some improved teams, not the teams we thought, but there are improved teams there. So you can't take a chance on sliding out of there. And I think, you know, you're going to have to do something. But, you know, there's not a lot of, you know, like I've heard some names floating around, and they're just not all that impressive, you know, in terms of, you know, I'm not even sure I believe they can plug the holes. So,
well, okay. And I'll first we'll mention what Eck reported. And I you know, I feel I have to shoot it down, because I don't believe it's the case that the Leafs are in on or they may be making inquiries on Erik Karlsson, but 4 years left at 11.5. They can't afford that. Even if San Jose retained 50%, 5.75 for another 4 years for a guy who continually he's having a fantastic year, no doubt about it. He's a great player. He's also extremely injury prone. And 4 years even at 5.75 would be too much. Eck mentioned something about like filtering it through a third team. Okay, what would the cost be to filter 25% of Erik Karlsson's deal for 4 years if you're Chicago or if you're San Jose? You're talking multiple draft picks.
I think you're talking first round pick.
Right.
You know, I think that's the key on that, to do all that money. I think, you know, if you were just trying to get $1 million, you could probably get away with a second.
Right.
But anything more than that, you're going to, you know, because that was one of the problems. I mean, there were some discussions. I know the Red Wings heard from some teams before the season, but he said nothing materialized, which was to me code for us. You know, we said we want a first round pick, and they said no. So I don't know. I don't think teams are willing to do that unless you pay an exorbitant price. Right. The one thing I think is ridiculous, I keep seeing these suggestions that, you know, that this would be actually a deal where San Jose gets something back. Like, that's, to me, is ludicrous. No. Like that, this is just a salary dump. Right. Because, you know, the Sharks would benefit greatly by being, you know, their rebuild could really get going if they could get that $11 million off their book. That's why I think it would be hard for them even to do 5.75 because you know,
they're looking to rid themselves of that contract completely, and I don't think that's at all possible, even with him playing the way he's playing right now, Russ. But I mean, the market has been set. If you remember, a couple years ago, Toronto had to trade Patrick Marleau with 1 year left at $6.25 million, and the price was a first-round pick. There was another deal this year where the price to dump Sean Monahan, I think, was a second-round pick. But there are other contracts out there that the price to dump a player with 1 year left was a first-round pick, and it's been established. Pacioretty was given away to Carolina. Matt Murray was given away to Toronto. San Jose is going to have to practically give away Karlsson and may have to give more assets to get rid of that.
Again, he may not want to go anywhere. I don't think he wants to go. True. So that could make
it. I think he would go Russ to a contender.
Yeah, okay. I mean, maybe, but either way,
I think he'd go to Florida. It
definitely would. It would be a complicated situation, and I do think they still would want a first because the guy's got too many points and goals to all of a sudden take a second round pick for him. Like, I don't think they would do that. The Leafs, though, Mike, I've been looking at stats and we're listening to people. I didn't get to watch that game, but it does seem like turnovers is, again, their issue. They play a little fast and loose still, and they do have turnovers in overtime too. And that's probably why they're not good in overtime.
Well, okay, first of all, I mean, they played a pretty good defensive game up until late in the third period where the giveaway was the goaltender, was Shalgren. He mishandled the puck, gave it to Josh Bailey, and he beat him they get the point. But in overtime, you're right. I mean, they're forwards, too cute, lots of drop passes, no puck possession. I mean, the one overtime against New Jersey earlier in the week, it was a 57-second overtime, and New Jersey had the puck for 56 of the 57 seconds. It was not that bad last night, but it was considerably bad, and they turn over the puck and they can't win. If they don't win the face-off, they don't possess the puck and they can't get it back. So
so that's an issue. Now, as far as getting a defenseman, everybody's answer is always like, well, go get a low-cost defenseman. But a low-cost defenseman costs you a lot in picks and assets because they're low cost and low against the cap. That's the problem. There's no low-cost defenseman that's really effective that's going to help you that you're going to get for a second-round pick.
Well, then, okay, the name that's been mentioned, it was mentioned by Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick on their podcast earlier in the week, and it's because he is on a conditioning stint with Arizona, with Tucson, and Connor Timmins. Obviously, there's a connection there. Again, he's a former Sault Ste. Marie Greyhound. They know him well. He was a defensive partner of Rasmus Sandin. He's making $850,000. The thing is, he's out of waivers. So it's a situation where if they don't trade him, they may have, and they don't have room on their roster, they may have to put him on waivers. I mean, Toronto could claim him, or other teams could claim him, but
he has a concussion history, a bad one too.
He does, and he had a knee injury that limited him to 6 games last year, and it's not perfect, Russ. And he's $850K. And, if they have confidence that he could be a stopgap, I mean, right now, you're talking about playing Victor Mete, who is a turnstile, or a Mac Hollowell, who's never played an NHL game, and giving 20-plus minutes to Justin Hall, a 39-year-old Mark Giordano, and Sandin and Liljegren. They don't have much of a choice. So right now, I think if they can find a body that they can plug in and it doesn't cost them an arm and a leg, I think they'll do it.
Yeah, I think they will too. But, this is where, again, not having a fair amount or a couple of good defensive forwards hurts them. They have one, but they really, that's where it hurts them. If they had, some defensive forwards, it would really help them in this chance. Right now, this is going to hurt them. I mean, even if their goaltending's good, how good could it be with all these guys out? That's the issue.
Yeah, right now, I would say basically they have to tread water for the next 3 or 4 weeks. Yeah. They go on the road 6 of 7, so it's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough for them right now. So if they can weather this storm, get good goaltending. I mean, the thing is, they're going to have to get good goaltending to survive this, and you're putting more pressure on guys like Murray, who didn't play last night because they needed to rest him, and Samsonov. I mean, it's just not good. Anyway, we'll get off the Leaf page here because I know everybody's sick of it. But I just wanted to say, because Joe Morello said, "Can we talk Sorokin?" Sorokin's fantastic. I mean, I was talking to Mick Kern, who was sitting next to me at the game last night.
Oh, really? I didn't realize.
Yeah, no. I mean, I'm sure he didn't mention it. But I said, we were talking about Sorokin, and I said, top 5. It's like, it's funny that
I said it on Sirius this morning. He's a top 5 goalie.
Well, the NHL Network said that before the season started.
Yeah, no, I mean, so it's not a revelation, Cal, but it's funny that 3 of the top. He asked me, is he better than Shesterkin? I said no, but he's top 5. It's like Vasilevsky, Sorokin, and Shesterkin are all in the top 5, and arguably the other 2 in the top 5 could be American, could be Ottinger, could be Demko. I mean,
Demko not now,
not this year, but I wonder.
Hellebuck's in there,
and I defer to Russ on this, but what about this year? Has Sorokin this year been better than Shesterkin, who has been
at the moment he is?
Been rather ordinary.
Yes, so. I think he's a little better than ordinary because the last couple, I think he's picked it up since he had like a little bit of a outburst in the hallway. But right now, Sorokin's better. We'll see if he's better for the whole year. But yeah, at this moment, this snapshot in time, he's better.
Now, I wanted to talk about this because it's very weird how, I mean, okay, in sports, you always have streaks. I get that. But this year, Kev, it seems that in the NHL, it's more streaky than normal. I mean, start with the Devils. I mean, now they've won, what is it, 12 or is it
13?
It's 13. They beat the Oilers last night 5-2. And if you want to talk about luck being bad and going from bad to worse, Jack Campbell not playing in the game gets hit with the puck. The conflicting information. First it was the eye, then it was the nose, but they had to put the e-bug on the bench to back up Stewart.
It looked like the eye, if you ask me.
Well, they Gene Principe said it was nose, but I haven't heard anything since. But bad luck for the Oilers. But the Devils, I mean, they were 3-3, and now they've won 13 in a row. They're good. Don't get me wrong, but 13 in a row good. I didn't see that.
Well, I'll tell you, they've been impressive.
Yes.
And it's been 20 years since the Devils team has won that many games. I mean, Jack Hughes wasn't even born the last time they did that. And, it's just so impressive. They're so fast. I brought this up the other day. I think they're the fastest team in the league.
Yeah, they are.
And what's interesting about me is you would just assume, if you didn't know anything about their stats, that Jack Hughes would be leading the charge. But he's only third on the team in scoring, and they've got a lot of players playing well up and down their lines. They've kind of turned it around. Like, it's not like nobody knew that they were improving. Everybody's
talking about them every year, but then we would always say, playoff team if they get goaltending. That's what we've been saying for the last 3 years.
But I mean, I think they've taken a quantum leap this year. Like, they've taken that big step that they've never taken before. And, it's really, I've seen them live and I've seen them on television, and I think they're a pretty impressive team. I think their transition game is good. And I think Lindy Ruff's, done a good job. Like, they're only 4 away from the NHL record. I mean, that's still a long way.
I think the brunette infusion is the difference here because they're quicker to the puck. They do kind of look like Florida last year. Mm-hmm. And so I do think brunette has had a really good influence on them. Guys like Tatar look back to normal. Like, Tatar hasn't been really that good in a couple of years. He's been like, okay, but now he's sort of looking like the Thomas Tatar that, used to play in Detroit. And you get that guy, like, that's a big boon in scoring. And Jesper Bratt has now turned into probably, a top 25 player in the league, and they didn't pay him enough. Like, that's gonna hurt him down the line.
Yeah, they've been really impressive, and I think their defense is much better than anyone anticipated. Much
better. Yeah.
The right side of their blue line, when you got Hamilton, they add Marino, and then you have Severson all on the right side, right shot defense.
And Marino was brutal last season.
Yeah.
He was.
Like, I mean, he just wasn't remotely the defense he had been last season. So I don't think anyone anticipated that as well. But I've been impressed by it. I like every once in a while, like, you hit the lottery and you do have the long, but those usually cap out at like 10. This is 13. Like, this is.
But I still look. They'll probably make the playoffs now because of the start. But I still have to see what Vanacek looks like after he's played 30 games. You know what I mean?
They need Blackwood.
Yeah, no, you're right on that. And it's funny, after we had that long discussion, I heard from 2 of our listeners who are, my people that watch, and it's interesting because one of them is our harshest critic, and he pointed out that was one of the more entertaining conversations that we've had, and he said what he really liked about it is he saw both sides of the argument. He saw Russ's side about that, and I thought about that conversation a lot because my wife overheard it too, and she goes, that was really interesting. And it was, the idea of probability. And, we've talked about this before, but Eklund's brought up, his wife just shakes her head because she's got a PhD, because, past events do not impact future occurrences.
Right.
And, like a mathematician doesn't see those statistics and say, well, there's a 95% probability that the Devils are going to win. Right. He would say, we don't even concern ourselves with that. We just know when those events have happened in the past, 95% of the time that the team did go on to win. It's kind of like the Thanksgiving thing that we've got coming up where, I just wrote on it, so I know the statistics, but do you guys all know the statistics on if you're in a playoff spot on Thanksgiving, how likely it is? I think
it's like 75%.
Yeah, it is. It's 76.
Okay.
76, in the modern era. But that, that doesn't really predict the future. It just tells you what's happened so far. But
it's a snapshot. But like as an example, though, St. Louis, who wasn't in that spot a week and a half ago, they're in that spot now.
Right. But all that does, it's just one of those indicators. That's the way I started to think.
There's always going to be one team or two teams that overshoot that. There is. There's always.
There's going to be four because that's what statistics say it is. Yeah.
Well, that's true. 25%.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what happened last time. But last season, 12 teams that were in the playoff spot on Thanksgiving did go to the playoffs, and only 4 did not. So so it does make sense. I wanted to bring up something just because, and I think this is along the lines of some of the things we're talking about. And it was just happenstance that I happened to hear it. I was listening to a radio show, and they were talking about, of all things, Formula One racing. And Formula One racing was very popular for a long time in Europe, but it started to wane a little bit. Right. And they never bothered to change anything in terms of marketing. So until they got sold to, I think, to an American company, and they wanted to be more popular. So they started to make it more fan friendly. Right. They wanted the fans to get involved. They wanted to give them more inside information. They did reality shows, and it absolutely worked. ESPN's ratings doubled, blowing by hockey, among other things. And they, really have had success for that. And this program that I was listening to then took it further. They were starting to talk about fandom. And there was 2 elements to it that I thought was fun. Number one is they did a study on what determines the team you root for. And it's their conclusion is that it's what, as a general rule, now it's not everyone, but as a general rule, someone between the age of 10 and 12, if that person experiences a championship or something, a good event with that team, he or she will be a lifelong fan of that. But it's between the ages of 10 and 12. That was the
interesting. But I do think there's one thing, Kev, that always has sort of worked for me. And I noticed it at a certain age is I always end up rooting for the underdog. And so, even though my teams did win when I was a kid, they were bad before they got good. And I was aware of how bad they were.
But don't you think that's human nature?
Maybe.
I think that's not sports as much as
there are other people. See, there are front runners though. That there are people that only wear Yankee hats or Dodger hats when they win or whatever, and those are the front runners. There are always going to be those people too. No, but you're a lifelong Yankee fan, so I can't fault you.
Yeah, no, I was 10 years old when they won in '77, so I fall under the parameters of what Kevin's talking about. My brother was 12 years old when the Leafs won in '67, so that's why he's a Leafs fan. So
I mean, it's just a study they did, and that's what you know. But here's the one I really liked. Because we see this as sports writers, we see it every day. Mm-hmm. And that is, they did a study, and it started with Yale Harvard football. Apparently, years ago, they had a very violent game, and people were hurt. And they then interviewed fans who were at the game from each school, and the remembrances of the game, even though it was right after it happened, were completely different. Okay. Completely different. And basically, the people saw both sides felt that the other side was responsible for the mess. So what they did was they then put each group in a room and let them watch it again in slow motion and see everything happen. And when they came out of that room, they then re-interviewed them and got their theory. about what had happened, and nobody changed their minds.
Wow.
Yeah, nobody changed their minds, and
It just shows how strong fandom can be.
that's exactly was their point. They've now, subsequently followed that up, and essentially their conclusion is something we throw around, but is actually true. People see what they want to see,
Right.
and we see that in every sport every day as a sports writer. Like, how many times do you see especially on supplemental discipline, where we all think we see it objectively, but we never do. Whatever your bias is built in, you just can't move off.
Yeah, confirmation bias is a real thing.
Yeah, no, it is. And I just found that whole thing really remarkable. But the part that I was really stung by is they brought people in and let them see it again.
Yeah.
And, helped them through with the different events. And
it's sort of willful blindness. It's like you're not even conscious of the fact, but you're overlooking certain things because of your biases, and even if you think you're down the middle, sometimes you're not.
Well, I mean, that's really, and that's the point they made too. The people all thought they were being objective,
right?
So.
It's funny that the Devils have won 13 in a row. They're 16-3, and yet they don't even have the best record in the conference, because that would be the Boston Bruins, who are 17-2. They beat the Tampa Bay Lightning last night 5-3. And again, the thing that's everything is going right for Jim Montgomery and the Bruins right now. Krejci comes back. It's like he hasn't skipped the beat. Bergeron gets his 1,000th point last night. They're getting good performances out of depth. People like Nick Foligno, who's bounced back from a really bad year. All their players are back now. McAvoy's back. Lindholm is basically playing at a Norris Trophy level. I mean, Kev, it's just like right now, nothing is going wrong with Boston.
Well, and there's heavy rumors that they're going to do something big. Like they're ready. They got their chips. They want to push them all in.
Patrick Kane, I've heard that.
They don't have a lot of assets though, like other than picks.
I don't think they care.
Yeah,
I think they're willing to mortgage because they know the window is.
No, but even for someone like Kane, I think they're going to struggle to come up. They have like maybe 3 really decent prospects.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's all it'll take one of those and a first round pick and another player. We know what the formula is, So.
It'll be Jake DeBrusk.
But if they lose like Fabian Lysell, like they're going to be bereft.
Well, Russ, I mean, come on. We know that in 2 years they're going to be in the lottery. I mean,
no, but I will say I thought the genius of what they did. They got Lindholm, and I know they got him because they knew McAvoy would be out and he would fill that role. But McAvoy.
No, they actually got him to play with them. I mean, they even said that when they got him.
Okay. See, I didn't realize they got him to play with him. Well, that was smart because again, there's very few teams that have that, and now they've got a commodity because again, Colorado's got that. Now they have that. There's very few teams that have guys that are that talented offensively. That's a big deal. So, we'll see. I mean, Montgomery's a good coach too, and Bergeron will probably play another 1,000 games just because it's Bergeron. But I still would worry about what I'm mortgaging for them though, because like Mike said, in a couple of years, that's going to happen again. And they practically bottomed out already.
Yeah, but I think they know that. I mean, I think that's part of it. I think that's why they're willing to do that now, is they know they're going to start over in a couple of years. So,
I mean, you would assume that they're going to pony up and pay Pasternak what he deserves, but maybe not. I mean, I would think that they, he's going to break 10 million. I don't think anybody in the history of the Bruins has. He's got 12 goals right now, so he's playing fantastic. But that organization has always been conservative when it comes to McAvoy was the first one that they paid big money to. Chara before him, but everybody was taking the Boston Bruins discount. Bergeron, Pasternak, Marchand, Krejci, they all took the discount, and now that discount is gone.
I wonder if Pasternak's going to lower his years though, because otherwise he'll be there for 4 or 5 years of a rebuild. He probably doesn't want to do that.
Well, I mean, he could take the 8-year deal and then just ask out.
Oh, of course, but at that point, it'd be harder to trade him. If he took like a 4-year deal, that would probably be ideal.
Well, maybe, yeah. I mean, maybe they believe, like I think they know that they're going into a rebuild at some point in the next couple of years, but maybe they think it's not going to be a full rebuild. They're not going to strip it down to the chassis. I mean, because they do have long-term deals with good players, so maybe they think they're going to try to change on the fly a little bit, where they're going to still have some good players and not have it take 5 to 7 years. But maybe 3 years. So
yeah. No, it's interesting though. I still go back. If they had done even 50% better in the 2015 draft in that first round, we wouldn't even be having this conversation.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, but that's
crazy how good they could have been.
Yeah, I mean, they just got that all wrong. So,
but I don't know how they would have moved the money around, Russ, if they had drafted Kyle Connor or.
Yeah, but still, you'd be moving it into star young players. It wouldn't matter.
But they wouldn't have brought back Krejci because they'd have Matt.
No, they wouldn't need him. Yeah, they wouldn't need him, and they could still make trades. And then if you traded someone like Lysell, it wouldn't matter as much because you'd have all this young talent.
Now, again, on the other,
they're a great team right now, so whatever.
Right. Now, talk about topsy-turvy. The St. Louis Blues, it sounded like they were going to fire Craig Berube because they had lost, I think it was like 8 in a row or something like that. Now they've won 7 in a row. Now they've just completely flipped, and now everything is beautiful in Missouri all over again. It's sunny in St. Louis, Russ.
I mean, we did think Berube was in trouble, but I know we also did say they have a lot of veterans on that team that maybe could get them out of it. I feel the opposite about Vancouver. I didn't care that they won a few games after they lost. I don't think they can get out of it. So can the Blues again be a factor in the playoffs? Yeah, because they have a goalie that won a Stanley Cup. They have a lot of good players that weren't playing well. And if all of a sudden they pick it up, yeah, they'll make a trade because Armstrong always makes trades, and they could be right in the thick of it. I mean, again, they weren't that far away from it last year. All they have to do is make it. They'll be a dangerous team.
Yeah, they shocked Minnesota last year. So the other team with the long losing streak is right here in River City. The Buffalo Sabres have lost 8 in a row. They play Montreal tonight. I see. The thing is, Kev, I even when they were 7-3, everybody was like, "This is great," but they were waiting. They were waiting for the other shoe to fall because they realized. There are some holes on this team. Dahlin is playing great. Tage Thompson's playing great. Owen Power looks like he's going to be really good. But you looked, and I believe this from the very beginning, you looked at the goaltending that they came into the season with, and you said, Eric Comrie and Craig Anderson is not the pairing of goaltenders that you would bring in if you think you were going to make the playoffs. And now Comrie's out for multiple weeks. They bring up Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen from Rochester. He did not play well against Toronto. He's young. He hasn't gotten a lot of games. He's been hurt over the last 3 or 4 years. Now, and they're not going to go out and trade for a goaltender. So if they continue down this slide another week or two with a 41-year-old Craig Anderson and a young goalie like Luukkonen, the season, not to say that anything can't be accomplished, but the season in terms of making the playoffs is over with.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly didn't think, I have to say that I was kind of wrong. After watching them early, I mean, I didn't believe they were a 700 hockey team, but I thought they were significantly improved. I thought, Dahlin was playing well and Owen Power was having an instant impact. But when I see them now, it's to me, it's not just a goaltender, it's the whole team now it's like it just lost its confidence, lost its mojo. They're just not even the same team we saw early when they were really feeling confident playing. I don't know what that's about. I mean, clearly they do need better goaltending. You can't, have the twosome they have and expect that you're going to be on top of the world.
I think the loss of Samuelson was a big thing because Dahlin is so much better with him than without him.
That makes sense, yeah.
And I do think that was the start of the downfall.
Yeah, now he's back. I mean,
he's back now.
Yeah, they not only lost him, but they lost Yoki Haru, who
right,
was
which is important too, no question. But the thing is, long term now, they're to me they're viewing Pekalukanen early here. But if he doesn't look great, their long term view now is going to have to be to go out and get a goalie for at least a 2-year contract, and because then you're not going to look at Pekalukanen until he's 25 or Portillo or Devin Levi, whatever, whoever it might be. But none of them are playing next year. So that's the thing. If you want this team to actually get better, and Pekalukanen is not quite ready yet, they do have to go and get a goalie in the offseason.
Now, the other team that's struggling in the Atlantic is Ottawa. They're 6-11-1. They lose 5-1 to San Jose last night. You know, things are just not going as expected. I mean, off the ice in terms of like them selling the team, that sounds optimistic because it sounds like, you know, that's going to happen and they're going to stay in Ottawa and they're going to get a new building built. But the expectation here with all the moves that they make was that they were going to push for one of those 3 or 4 spots in the Atlantic. And Kev, I mean, defensively, they're not good, which I thought that was the case. The goaltending, Talbot being out for the first month hurt them because Forsberg is not a pure number one. They lose Norris. They're getting good performances from some of their guys like Kachuk and Stützle, but there's not enough there. And I mean, I think that the fact that Dorian went all in on some of these moves, I mean, when new ownership comes in, I don't think he's keeping his job. That's my opinion.
Oh, I don't know about that. I think most of his moves have been good moves, but you know they still weren't deep enough to sustain any measure of things going wrong, and you know, and it just, you know, starting with Cam Talbot on the injured list didn't help, and you know, I watched the game the other night, and it looked to me like Sanderson was trying to do too much. Where, you know, I think they actually I like the idea of Carlson going to Ottawa. I think that makes some sense, actually. You know, he would be comfortable there. You know, I think they could use another veteran defenseman who could move the puck. You know, they've got the money to handle 4 years. As long as San Jose will eat half the money. I'm not sure they will, but
Yeah.
But if they're willing to do that, they really do need a veteran defenseman. I also thought Chychrun going there would make some sense as well.
I thought they could make the playoffs. I also was banking on them getting Chychrun. Neither had happened so far, and now the goalie tandem's ranked like 30th in the league.
Yeah.
So that's, you know, and I don't like Forsberg, but I do like Talbot, and I'm surprised that, you know, it's there right now. And then, you know, again, I knew that there were injuries, but I was surprised that they cut bait and just let Colin White just kind of go to free agency. And, you know, he's playing well in Florida. He's got 11 points in 18 games. Yeah. Nobody has ever questioned Colin White's play. They've only questioned, can he stay on the ice? But when he's healthy, he's a really good player. And unfortunately, I think they're missing him too. Now,
opposed to that, Kev, Detroit, I mean, right now they're in a top 4 spot in that division. I don't think they're playing above expectations. I think they're sort of fulfilling what we thought they'd be competitive. It's 20 games in the season, but right now, I mean, it looks like they can stay in this for a while.
Yeah. I mean, a lot depends on what they look like when everybody's back from injury. Like some of the things that were holding them back were adjusting to the way that Derek Lalonde wants them to play. You know, the injuries. They had 3 of their top 6 forwards out. And now Bertuzzi is back. They still don't know when they're going to get Verana, but Robbie Fabre is going to be back January 1st. And the other thing, it's a small thing, but their third pairing was not very good. Lindstrom, who's a younger player, was paired with Hag, who, you know, adds a physical element, but is inconsistent in his defensive play. So when Pizzak gets back, you know, they've got Jake Wallman, who's got some offense to him.
Yep.
But, you know, now Jordan Osterley is suddenly +7 in a handful of games. He's playing a little better, and they look a little better defensively. So it's going to be interesting. They have a stretch coming up where they play a lot of good teams. They play I think they play Colorado and Toronto and Tampa Bay. They 5 or 6 games in a row. They had that same stretch last year. Then it sent them on a tailspin. If they can get through that, then I think they can be competitive the rest of the season.
The interesting thing is they really did upgrade in net with Ville Husso too. That's a factor.
Yeah.
No, and it has been for sure. Like it's not even, he's a clear cut, as we like to say in our business, number one.
Yeah.
I mean, he's played well. And
you all liked him, but I was wondering. I was like, can he be a number one? I don't know, but they knew.
Yeah. No, they like him. He looks 14, but he plays like he's 27. So he's been very good. There's no doubt about it.
I do want to bring up the Flyers because of the streak too. They're at 7 games. It's interesting how the coach is sort of handling it because he's not acting like a coach that's on a 7-game losing streak. Look, I know players are injured, but you could just look at the Leafs, and the Leafs have as bad an injury right now as anybody in the league. So, because the Flyers always want to say we're the worst injured team in the league, and fall back on that. And I don't feel like you should ever fall back on that. So, they've lost 7 in a row. I think they're playing the wrong way because if you want to be the best forechecking team and want to play hard and play responsible, that's fine. But they met a team last night who was still struggling in Calgary, but plays a forechecking faster game, much faster. And the thing is, you can't out forecheck a team that you can't catch. And so for most of that game, Calgary possessed the puck. Now, they couldn't get the 4th goal, which would have ended it much earlier because Carter Hart played well. But at the end of the day, they eventually got a 4th. And then for some reason, at 4-2, they still kept Carter Hart. They pulled him again, and it was quickly 5-2. Like, it was pretty quick on 4-2. Like, there was 2 shots. Markstrom made 1 great save, pushed it to the corner. They get a 4th goal. But then they let it get it to a 5th, and I almost felt like Tortorella was punishing the guys out there because there was no point in having the goalie pulled anymore the way they were playing. They weren't going to tie that game up.
Yeah, that's a message pull. Which I've never agreed with.
Right. So I felt like that was going on. But at the end of the day, right now, even if you're a team that didn't expect to be good, and even if you're a team that you want them to play to a certain way or standard like he wants, losing streaks aren't good for any of that. It doesn't matter if you're not expected to win or be a good team. You don't want to lose like 10 straight. And they're heading that way because they're going to go to Washington, and that's not going to be an easy game. And then they're playing Pittsburgh on Black Friday, and then the Islanders after that. Like, this is they're on a bad path right now, and somehow they're going to have to get out of it in one of these games.
All right. Great show, guys. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast, where I guess we'll preview Thanksgiving, talk about our favorite Thanksgiving food or something. I don't know. We'll mix it up there. For Kevin Allen, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.
Go Vikings.